Welcome to my review of Spiderboy Book 1. The cover was done by Humberto Ramos and Edgar Delgado. There are 2 stories in this issue, but for this video, I'm going to be focusing solely on the main storyline, which is titled Solo Run, that was written by Dan Slott, art by Paco Medina, colored by Eric Arciniega, and lettered by Joe Caramanga. Since this is only a review of Spiderboy Book 1, I'm not going to go too deeply into his origin story, but I do plan on doing a character biography video on Spiderboy in the near future. I will touch on some details so that we have a place of reference that will give some context at where we are in the story. With that being said, let's begin with Solo Run. We see Spider-Man and Spiderboy battling at Lucky Lang's bowling alley against one of Spiderboy's nemesis, Gutterball. Now Gutterball is shooting these 2 guns that fire bowling pins. Now Spider-Man and Spiderboy are easily dodging these projectiles using their spider-like agility, all the while protecting any civilians that are in the bowling alley from any harm. Throughout the entirety of the fight, Spider-Man and Spiderboy are going back and forth sharing bowling puns, which is driving Gutterball crazy. I like the lighthearted banter that they're having. To me, it shows that the chemistry that they have is more brotherly rather than hero-sidekick. But before I go any further, here's some of that context. On Earth 616, Spiderboy was the sidekick of Spider-Man for several years, until events involving the wasp totem Shathra wiped him from existence and erased everybody's memory of him, including Spider-Man. But recently, Spiderboy has convinced Spider-Man of this reality, and Spider-Man once again takes him under his wing. After defeating Gutterball, it's obvious that the people in the bowling alley are still afraid, and that's because they're afraid of Spiderboy. Spiderboy's abilities aren't as covert as Spider-Man's are. One of them he refers to as monstering out. That's when he takes on a physical change and multiple eyes appear upon his head. He can produce fangs. I mean, these things give him a tactical advantage in a fight, but his outward appearance does look a little monsterly, and this was captured on camera and put on the front page of the Daily Bugle, showing Spiderboy in this monstrous state, chomping down on Electro's neck in a fight that took place shortly before the events of this issue. So Spider-Man, seeing the fear in the people and the frustration that Spiderboy has, he decides to take action. So he heads on down to the Daily Bugle, where he finds Robbie Robertson interviewing Miss Lane, the owner of Lucky Lane's bowling alley. And he tries to convince Robbie to do a redaction of the front page story that shows Spiderboy to be seen in a negative light. That doesn't happen, but they do come to an agreement with Miss Lane, and she's decided to give him essentially the key to the bowling alley. He's allowed to come down and bowl whenever he wants for as long as he wants. And they decide to even make a spectacle out of it, to do a whole ribbon cutting thing. And this is just to portray to the public that Spiderboy is a hero and he's not someone to be feared. Next, we find ourselves at Feast, the shelter that Aunt May runs. And this is where we find Spiderboy, aka Bailey Briggs, currently residing. And Bailey, he's not feeling too good right now. He's depressed because of the way the public sees him, and they see him as a freak. They don't see him for who he truly is. And we find him confiding this in one of his best friends, Christina Shu. So Christina Shu's family, they have decided to take Bailey under their care and to watch out for him. Now Christina is one of the only other people besides Peter Parker who knows his true identity. And as Christina is starting to cheer Bailey up, in comes Peter Parker, and he delivers the good news to Bailey about the ceremony, about the unlimited bowling, and this really cheers Bailey up. And he even goes on to ask Peter if it involves free games and free food, but Peter says to just not press his luck. And as things are starting to look up for Spiderboy, of course, an old villain of his known as Madame Monstrosity has just taken interest in him. She's claiming that he looks like one of her creations. Madame Monstrosity creates these things called humanimals, in which she crosses an animal with a human. And she sees from a news article the whole bowling alley ceremony that's about to take place and decides to send one of her humanimals there to capture Spiderboy. Now at the ceremony, where Spiderboy is receiving all the applause and admiration that he's so been craving, he and the rest of the people in attendance begin to hear gargantuan footsteps approaching. With the sound of that, the audience begins to grow fearful, and Spiderboy knows who's on their way. And at this point, we get a flashback into the creation of Spiderboy. Now it turns out Spiderboy was a creation of Madame Monstrosity. We see him in the chamber where the transformation takes place, and we can see his monstering out form, what it looks like without the mask, and he catches a glimpse of himself while he's being taken back to his cell. Now upset and distraught because of what's been done to him, his friend and cellmate next door, Eli, begins to cheer him up with all sorts of animal jokes, and it really cheers up Bailey. And so Bailey decides to fire back with one of his, and he asks Eli, "What do you get when you cross an elephant with a rhinoceros?" Eli's unsure, and Bailey responds by saying, "Hell if I know." And both boys begin to laugh and just share this beautiful moment, forgetting the fact that they're actually imprisoned at this point. But of course, that good feeling is destroyed when Madame Monstrosity overhears what the boys are talking about, and she thinks that the crossing of an elephant and a rhinoceros would be a good idea and decides to test that idea out on Eli. And both boys are screaming out no in protest, but Eli is taken, and Bailey is left crying, telling Eli how sorry he is that this is happening. Now fast forward back to the bowling ceremony, where that villain who was approaching with the thunderous footsteps is now in full view, and what stands before Spiderboy is a cross between a human, an elephant, and a rhinoceros. And yes, he goes by the name Elefino. And so a battle ensues. Now Spiderboy is being being overwhelmed by Elefino due to Elefino's strength and size and speed. And when he has Spider-Boy wrapped up in his trunk, he's instructed by Madame Monstrosity, who's actually watching the whole thing via a camera that is hung around Elefino's neck, and tells Elefino to unmask Bailey. And instead of fully unmasking him, Elefino just takes the back of Bailey's mask off so you don't actually see his face, but there is a barcode back there. And once Madame Monstrosity sees that, she knows for sure that that is one of her creations. And she's frustrated and wondering why she doesn't remember making him. But Elefino has started to become enraged due to the people who are around him calling him freak and a monster. But then Spider-Boy smashes the camera that's hung around his neck and gets a moment to speak with Elefino, and he uses his real name, Eli, explaining to him that he doesn't have to act this way, that he can make a choice. And in that moment, Elefino decides that he's done with this mission and flees the scene. Now Christina comes to Spider-Boy's side, explaining to him that she still has faith in him, and the next time he encounters Elefino, that he's gonna beat him. And Spider-Boy replies, "No, Christina, the next time I see him, I'm gonna save him." So overall, I enjoyed this comic. I think it helped because I didn't go into it with any expectation really. Like, I knew it was gonna be lighthearted. I thought it was probably gonna be a bit shallow. I didn't think they were gonna go deep on anything, but I was pleasantly surprised, and the relationship that him and Eli had while they were locked up, and how quickly that was destroyed and dismantled by Madame Monstrosity, and then him coming back at the end of their battle saying that he's not gonna destroy him or he's not gonna beat him, but he's actually gonna save him. So I really liked that. I really thought that was a very heroic thing for him to say. So if we look back at the beginning of the book and we just see them fighting Gutterball, we see the puns and the jokes, and it was a little corny but a little silly, but I actually liked it. I thought it was playful, and I really did like the interaction between him and Spider-Man, because Spider-Boy isn't his partner. Spider-Boy is his sidekick. So seeing him emulate Spider-Man is something that I did want to see. I didn't want to see him to contrast Spider-Man or to be the opposite of, kind of like how Batman and Robin are. I just didn't really think that would fit with Spider-Man and as we know him. Now, should Spider-Man even need a sidekick? If you were to ask me that before I started learning about this character, I would have said no, he doesn't need one. And when he just showed up at the finale at the end of the Spider-Verse comic storyline, I thought it was just like a one-off. I didn't think there was going to be anything more with this character. But then we see him in the following Spider-Man issues after his first appearance in Spider-Man number 7, and now Marvel has given him his own ongoing series. I think it's safe to say that they're going to invest more time and effort into this character, and I really hope that it pays off, because although I do like the character of Bailey Briggs, I'm not entirely sold on Spider-Man having a sidekick. Part of me loves it, a part of me doesn't. But moving forward, I really do hope that they allow Spider-Boy to carve out his own identity and separate himself from Spider-Man. And I hope they're not using Spider-Man as a crutch just to sell comic books, because I don't think that's going to last very long. I mean, it is nice to see big names associated with newer characters, but at least for myself as a fan, I'd really like to see these characters stand on their own, because there's nothing better than a great story, great character development, and there's plenty of examples of that out there. So I do hope that Spider-Boy is a part of that circle of success. And I will be picking up issue number 2, and I will be doing another review and summary on that book as well. So be on the lookout for that. And always remember to continue to support your local comic and game shop. And I appreciate all of you who are out there watching. Thanks again.